Thanks for joining us on Planet America. I'm John Barron.
And I'm Chaz Cidello.
This week, the death of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny is having a major political impact in the United States. We're going to speak to Putin critic Bill Browder shortly.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump's legal battles are getting very expensive. $500 million and counting. And the criminal trials are yet to begin. But first...
The death of Alexei Navalny in a remote Russian prison this week has potential implications for the funding of Ukraine's war effort and Donald Trump's hopes of returning to the presidency. After the first reports of Navalny's death appeared, President Biden was quick to point the finger.
Make no mistake, Putin is responsible for Navalny's death. Putin is responsible.
The US Congress, though, is on a 2-week break, so there has been no movement on that foreign aid bill already passed by the Senate.
And John Biden had something to say about that as well.
2 weeks, they're walking away. 2 weeks. What are they thinking?
Of course, time is of the essence for the Ukrainians at the moment. Just this week, Ukraine's military was forced to withdraw from the city of Avdiivka because their soldiers had to ration ammunition due to dwindling supplies. So that was a real own goal. And Europe's kind of putting America to shame here. Denmark literally just donated their entire stockpile of artillery rounds to Ukraine for exactly these reasons. But obviously no one is going to replace the military and economic power of America when they choose to deploy it, that is.
Yeah, indeed. House Speaker Mike Johnson is now under increasing pressure to bring that Senate bill to a floor vote in the House. Meanwhile, a compromise plan is now doing the rounds, reattaching border security to that original bill, making it a loan to Ukraine for lethal weapons. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, who voted against that Senate bill, now thinks there could be a way forward for aid to Ukraine on Capitol Hill. And he also wants Russia declared a state sponsor of terror.
Navalny was one of the bravest people I've ever met. When he went back to Russia, he had to know he was going to be killed by Putin, and he was murdered by Putin. So why don't we do this? I just got off the phone with 2 Democratic senators. Let's make Russia a state sponsor of terrorism under U.S. law. Let's make them pay a price for killing Navalny.
Well, in return for those comments, Russia has just added Lindsey Graham to a list of terrorists and extremists.
Now, you might be wondering how much Lindsey Graham really cares about Navalny, given he can't even say the guy's name.
Navalny.
I think that last one was just Valley.
Sounded like it.
Anyway, to be fair to Lindsey Graham, that was actually pretty good compared to his efforts with the names of House reps that he works with.
The Problem Solvers Caucus, Congressman Fitzpatrick and Gossenheim. I'm sorry, Josh, I can't
Josh
remember your
Gottheimer
last
from
name
New Jersey.
Here. Gossenheim. Yeah.
Jeez, if he gets any more confused, he's going to have to run for president.
Again, there was some interest in what former President Donald Trump would have to say about the death of Alexei Navalny. Would he criticise Vladimir Putin? No.
The sudden death of Alexei Navalny has made me more and more aware of what is happening in our country. It is a slow, steady progression with crooked, radical left politicians, prosecutors, and judges leading us down a path to destruction.
Well, Trump's Republican presidential rival Nikki Haley, who of course served as US ambassador to the United Nations, had this unflattering assessment of Trump's response.
Either he sides with Putin and thinks it's cool that Putin killed one of his political opponents, or he just doesn't think it's that big of a deal. Either one of those is concerning.
And former Republican Speaker and one-time presidential candidate Newt Gingrich probably had the worst hot take of the week, claiming that Democrats in 4 different jurisdictions are trying to turn President Trump into an American Navalny.
Yeah, there's been a lot of that from Trump supporters on Twitter the last few days, and it's kind of ironic because only a few weeks back that Trump literally argued in court that a president who assassinated their rivals should be immune from consequences. Thankfully, none of Biden's enemies, or Trump's enemies for that matter, are going to be sent to Siberia to be murdered. Maybe Americans should try to keep it that way when they go to court. Just quickly though, you might be wondering why people are just assuming that Putin had Navalny killed. After all, people don't necessarily live long in Polar Wolf Prison, which is the place he got shunted off to. Well, as you can see here, the day before Navalny died, he was in court and he seems pretty healthy and in good spirit.
Alexei тоже нам скидывается всей зоны.
His good humour was kind of his superpower. But that suggests that he probably might have been killed. But by who? Well, we know this. There is an election in a month in Russia, and 4 years ago, just before the election then, Navalny found himself in a coma after he was poisoned by a Russian nerve agent. So Putin's got form. Unfortunately, that's where my knowledge ends. So should we speak to someone who knows a bit more than me?
Yeah, let's do exactly that, Chaz. Joining us now is businessman and prominent anti-Putin activist and friend of Alexei Navalny, Bill Browder. Bill, welcome to Planet America.
My pleasure.
Do you have any more information you can share with us about the circumstances surrounding his death, and also whether there's any doubt in your mind that Putin was behind it?
Yes, of course this is Putin's doing. Putin kills all sorts of people all over the world all the time. There's many dozens and dozens of victims that are high-profile victims of Putin. Putin tried to kill Navalny before. He tried to kill him with Novichok, a banned chemical nerve agent, back in 2020. He failed. And then Navalny came back into his custody to be finally killed now. There's no question. And not just Putin's pattern of killing and his hatred of Navalny, but also the conduct of the Russian government after this killing. The fact that they won't release his body to Alexei's mother, the fact that they've changed the cause of death. And by the way, this is all standard operating procedure. I've seen it before after the murder of my lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, 15 years ago. We saw exactly the same conduct. This is a murderous criminal regime that's killed the most important political figure in the country, and they've done it right in front of the whole world and think that they can get away with it.
So why do you think Putin would have Navalny murdered right now in particular when he had them all locked up in Siberia?
I think the main reason is that there's an election coming up. It's not a real election because Putin doesn't have any opponents. And the reason he doesn't have any opponents is because he's either locked up or killed all of the people who are opposition politicians. But he has an election coming up. And if it looks too illegitimate, then he runs the risk of people rising up and taking him out. And if he's taken out of his position, he probably dies. And so you've got a weak little man who's petrified of death, who's going to try to get rid of all uncertainty. And Alexei Navalny was his biggest uncertainty. And so, in my opinion, the timing was due to the election.
Bill, President Biden said he was not surprised, but he was outraged. Do you think that Alexei Navalny expected this?
I don't think that anyone expects to be killed. I think Alexei Navalny was making a bet. His bet was that he would go back to Russia. This was after he had been poisoned and recovered in Berlin. He knew they were going to arrest him, but he was going to go back to Russia, sit in jail like Nelson Mandela. And then when the Putin regime fell, like the apartheid regime did in South Africa, he would emerge as the leader of a free Russia. That was his positive bet. That's what he was hoping for. And sadly, he miscalculated and he didn't emerge, and Putin didn't, his regime didn't collapse, and instead Putin killed him.
What impact do you think Navalny's death has had on regular Russians? Do you think his martyrdom has inspired them, or are they just too beaten down and cynical to care?
Well, I think that there's some Russians that are too beaten down and cynical to care, but I think there's a lot of people that are seething in the privacy of their own homes, that are absolutely furious. And I think that this is probably the most significant political assassination in many decades. This is a really very serious thing. This is like the murder of Martin Luther King in the United States. And I think that the consequences are yet to even be felt, but we're going to see that the ripples from this terrible action of Putin's for a long time to come.
And Bill, what have you made of the reaction to Navalny's death in the United States? In particular, former President Trump's failure to criticize Vladimir Putin.
Well, former President Trump has showed his, weird, obsessive, and inexplicable love for Putin for a long time. It's very disheartening for me to see any American, particularly someone who calls themselves a Republican, siding with Vladimir Putin. It doesn't make any sense to me. I find it offensive, and I wish that he wasn't such a popular political candidate, because I think this is potentially very damaging if he ends up as the next president.
It does seem, Bill, that possibly this killing may have broken the impasse on Capitol Hill over aid to Ukraine in particular. Do you think this could be a circuit breaker?
I think definitely. I think that whatever the political environment was last week in Washington, it's a very different political environment this week. I mean, no matter how pro-Putin you might be as a MAGA wing of the member of the MAGA wing of the Republican Party, you're not going to be able to stand up in front of American citizens and say you support Putin after this atrocity.
Bill Browder, thank you for taking the time to talk to us this week.
Thank you.
The death of Alexei Navalny has cast that 2-hour interview between Vladimir Putin and Tucker Carlson in a new and more sinister light. Tucker seemed to have a lovely time in Russia, marvelling at their spotless subway and ornate train station. And his wonderment at the modern technological marvel that is the coin deposit trolley.
All right, there we go. So I guess you put in 10 rubles here and you get it back when you put the cart back. So it's free, but there's an incentive to return it and not just bring it to your homeless encampment.
So imagine Tucker's confusion when he found the free trolleys at Dubai airport hadn't all been stolen by homeless people. But I digress. He stopped by in Dubai on the way home to a world government conference where he was actually quizzed about that Putin interview by a pretty soft-hitting Egyptian journalist, Imad Adib, who did still air some of the criticisms that have been levelled at Tucker.
You didn't talk about freedom of speech in Russia. You did not talk about Navalny, about assassinations, about the restrictions on opposition in the coming elections.
Carlson's response was, well, see for yourself.
I have spent my life talking to people who run countries in various countries and have concluded the following, that every leader kills people, including my leader. Every leader kills people. Some kill more than others. Leadership requires killing people, sorry.
Leadership requires killing people, sorry? That was Monday. By Friday, Navalny was dead. Now, I'm not suggesting that Putin saw that interview and thought, gee, Tucker says it's okay, I killed Navalny, let's go to it. But I can't help but wonder what would have happened if Tucker had acted like a journalist and not a fanboy and asked Putin about Navalny. Could that just possibly have made a difference?
Look, I suspect Putin's tyrant moves a month before an election probably have more to do with the election itself than with any questions that Tucker might or might not have asked. And we should emphasise, by the way, Tucker isn't still defending Putin now. He said after Navalny's death, it's horrifying what happened to Navalny. The whole thing is barbaric and awful. No decent person would defend it.
Although Tucker has already defended it, thereby, by his own definition, he is also indecent.
Jon Stewart made the same point. Great minds think alike, John. But I do agree with you and John that the week-long propaganda tour of Russia was nauseating. He literally marvelled at how cheap everything is there. Of course, things are always cheap when you visit a developing nation, like say when Aussies visit Bali. Just check out the turn to evil music in this clip.
So we were guessing what this would cost. Everybody hears from the United States buys groceries, and we didn't pay any attention to costs as we were just putting in the cart what we would actually eat over a week. And we all came in around $400, about $400. It was $104 US here. And that's when you start to realize that ideology maybe doesn't matter as much as you thought, corruption. If you take people's standard of living and you tank it through filth and crime and inflation, and they literally can't buy the groceries they want, at that point, maybe it matters less what you say or whether you're a good person or a bad person. You're wrecking people's lives in their country, and that's what our leaders have done to us.
So you get that? Things aren't cheap in Russia because the average wage in Russia is literally $200 a week. It's because our leaders have sold us out. You see, ideology doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if your leaders are good people or bad people. It just matters if the prices are cheap. And he carried that thought on with that interview that John played before.
At a certain point, I don't think the average person cares as much about abstractions as about the concrete reality of his life. And if you can't use your subway, for example, as many people are afraid to in New York City because it's too dangerous, you have to sort of wonder, like, isn't that the ultimate measure of leadership?
No, safety on the subway or the purchasing power of tourists and supermarkets is not the ultimate measure of leadership. I think the last few days made that incredibly clear. But Tucker was so intent on making cute little ideological hits and being contrarian, I think he kind of lost sight of the fact that this is not a game. There are real people dying in Russia because they don't have the freedoms that Tucker just treated with utter indifference. But he's not the only one taking our political freedom for granted. The people comparing Trump to Navalny, for instance, or the people trying to co-opt Navalny's death to push whatever political barrow they're trying to push, they're also taking our political freedom for granted. So why don't we all just learn from Tucker's mistake? Don't be a Tucker, at least for a few minutes, please.
There's some more bad news for Donald Trump on the legal front this week.
The former president fined a staggering $355 million and banned from doing business for 3 years in New York, the city where he built his fortune and made his name.
New York's Democratic Attorney General Letitia James, who brought the charges against Trump, was then taking a bit of a victory lap.
Donald Trump falsely, knowingly, inflated his net worth by billions of dollars to unjustly enrich himself, his family, and to cheat the system. Donald Trump may have authored the art of the deal, but he perfected the art of the steal.
I'm going to write that one down. That's good. That's good. But add to that, Chaz, the ruling that $83 million the jury has ordered Trump to pay to the advice columnist E. Jean Carroll, who he defamed after being found liable for sexually assaulting last year, which also came with a $5 million fine at the time. And tally it all up, this is getting pretty expensive for Trump. $542 million and counting so far in these legal judgments.
And for those wondering about the maths just then, that sum also includes the interest that Trump has to pay on the dubious transactions. That's set at 9% per annum. Letitia James calculated that was worth over $86 million a few weeks back. It's actually adding by $90,000 a day, so it's pushing $100 million now. It's a fair chunk of change. Although, the good news for Trump is that the judge reversed his previous ruling to dissolve Trump's entire business. And, well, that's it for the good news. This might take care of all of Trump's liquid assets. Trump previously had said that he is substantially in excess of $400 million in cash, but Bloomberg estimated that he has around $600 million. So this could eat up all of it. And Trump's sons, Don Jr. and Eric, will also have to stay out of New York business for 2 years while paying a $4 million fine each. Now, a number of people have raised concerns about the fact that this crime had no direct victims. The banks that Trump ripped off, they didn't really mind it. He still paid back his loans on time, and those banks did just fine for themselves. Well, Letitia James responded to that idea with this. Everyday Americans cannot lie to a bank to get a mortgage to buy a home, and if they did, our government would throw the book at them. There simply cannot be different rules for different people. I don't know what you think about that theory, but I would add to that with this. Don't feel too sorry for Trump. Remember, he's been involved in more than 3,500 lawsuits over the last 30 years, many of them involving ordinary Americans who say Trump or his companies refuse to pay them for their services. So he's been playing legal roulette for some time.
And he's finally found a big old bullet. Trump's response on Truth Social this week was predictable, maybe even a little half-hearted.
This is a coordinated election interference witch hunt being directed by crooked Joe Biden.
Meanwhile, a group of protesters gathered outside of Trump Tower in New York to try and troll the former president with a going out of business sale. And the court cases for Trump continue apace. Fani Willis, the district attorney in Fulton County, Georgia, who's overseeing the election interference case against Trump in that state, has denied this week that she profited from the appointment of the special prosecutor in that case, Nathan Wade. Willis has denied that pair's romantic relationship began before she appointed Wade to the case. Trump's legal team have a witness that claims that the affair actually began in 2019, that is before Willis hired Wade. That may look improper, but it's not illegal unless the pair have been lying under oath, which is why it was a big deal when Willis unexpectedly took the stand in a pre-trial hearing this week And things got a bit heated.
You've been intrusive into people's personal lives. You're confused. You think I'm on trial. These people are on trial for trying to steal an election in 2020. I'm not on trial, no matter how hard you try to put me on trial.
And things also got a bit personal.
This is what you're really asking about. This is the salaciousness of all of this, right?
No, I'm just asking about your romantic relationship, when you stopped dating.
We heard an awful lot of detail about Mr. Wade's cancer diagnosis in around that time and his ability to gain an erection, but most of the questions did centre on who paid for flights, cruises and vacations that the pair took together.
I know I paid for the New Year's Eve trip because the tickets were $697 each, and I thought this is ridiculous that the tickets are $700 to go to Miami, but when you travel during New Year's Eve, you know, they get you.
Or they get you for lying under oath. We'll see what the judge makes of all of that, Chaz.
Yeah, the witness testifying against Fani Willis was pretty definitive.
Did you observe them do things that are common among people having a romantic relationship?
Yes.
Such as, can you give us an example?
Hugging, kissing, just affection.
All before November 1st of 2021, correct?
Yes.
And that certainly convinced MSNBC's legal analyst at least.
Don't let the legalese fool you. This is epic. This is monumental. If things are going in the direction we think, Fani Willis lied to the court, it's game over for her. She will be disqualified if they had a relationship prior to when they represented to the court.
But it turned out that Willis and the witness are having some kind of feud, so that might have compromised the impact of the witness's testimony somewhat. Besides, like you said, John, this is really about who paid for what between Willis and Wade. Willis had a very simple answer to any financial questions. I paid them back completely in cash.
So you have no proof of any reimbursement for any of these things because it was all cash, right?
The testimony of one witness is enough to prove a fact.
So my question was, do you have any proof?
Is that what you're intimating right here?
I'm asking if you have any proof that you paid him any of these
The proof is what I just told you.
A lack of written proof certainly seems convenient, but Willis trotted out her own dad to back her up.
It's a black thing, okay? You know, I was trained, and most black folks, they hide cash or they keep cash. And I've told my daughter, you keep 6 months worth of cash always.
So yeah, I don't know what the judge is going to say to all that, but remember, for Willis to be disqualified, they have to prove there is a conflict of interest here that disadvantages the people she's prosecuting. And I didn't see too much during that hearing that would be bothering Trump. In fact, I think Trump would have loved it.
Yeah, he probably would have. His lawyers obviously want to push this trial, at the very least, past November's election by having Willis and Wade removed from it. It's also possible the whole case could collapse if they need to find a new prosecutor. They could decide we're not even going to pursue it. Meanwhile, perhaps because of all the money that Donald Trump is being forced to pay out right now, he's just launched a new line of never surrender sneakers. Yes, really. In the tradition of Trump steaks, Trump vodka and Trump urine testing kits, that's a thing too. The former president unveiled the new range at the weekend at Philadelphia's SneakerCon.
I've wanted to do this for a long time. I have some incredible people that work with me on things, and they came up with this, and this is something I've been talking about for 12 years, 13 years. And I think it's going to be a big success.
The publicity blurb says that these gym boots are bold, gold and tough, just like President Trump. And they're being sold for $399 a pair. A sneaker con of another kind, perhaps, but it's still cheaper than that urine test. And if that's all a little rich for your blood, there's always a new line of Trump Victory 47 cologne. A steal at just $99. So, by my counting, Chaz, he only needs to sell 1 million of the shoes and of the cologne, and he's home and hosed. Well, it does turn out they've only made 1,000 pairs of those gold sneakers. Ever the politician, though, Donald Trump invited a Trump supporter wearing a hoodie onto the stage, and she was, well, let's just say, enthusiastic.
Yes, we need him. He's a Christian. He's a good, honest man. They're after him for no reason. Go out and vote for Trump. Vote Trump.
She's very happy about her shoes, John. Now, look, I know cynical types might point out it could take up to 5 months for customers to receive their shoes, but Think about what you can do when you actually get the shoes. For just $400, you can win Eurovision. I completely unironically love that song, John. Get me those shoes!
Trump killed irony a long time ago.
But look, it's time for everyone's favourite sting. Now, if you're on the Hunter Biden beat, you would be well familiar with 2023's biggest bombshell.
A Ukrainian energy executive who was part of an alleged pay-to-play scheme involving then Vice President Biden claims he has recordings of Mr. Biden pressuring the company to hire his son.
The Burisma executive, who claims to have paid both President Biden and his son Hunter $5 million apiece, reportedly made 17 audio recordings of his conversations, 2 of those recordings with President Biden.
So, just to be clear, according to an FBI confidential human source, executives for Burisma brought Hunter Biden on the board to, quote, protect them through his dad from all kinds of problems. And they paid a $5 million bribe to Hunter Biden and a $5 million bribe to Joe Biden. And they've got proof in the form of many text messages and recordings, apparently, to show that Burisma was coerced into paying the Bidens. We're talking 2 recordings of Joe Biden, 15 recordings of Hunter. Pretty big if true.
I would characterize it as a detailed document. It was very credible and legitimate. I would not brush it off like the FBI has.
Well, thankfully, the FBI stopped brushing it off because this week they charged the very credible, legitimate human source with fabricating his claims. How do they know that he made them up, though? After all, he swore to have met with the Burisma executives several times in 2015 and 2016. They told him this stuff face to face. Well, turns out they know the Burisma officials did not tell him face-to-face that they were bribing Biden in 2015 because he only met those Burisma officials in 2017. As far as one of the executives goes, who he supposedly met in 2015-16, they even have the introductory email between him and the Burisma exec from April 2017. So, why couldn't the Burisma guys have told the source that they were bribing Joe Biden in 2017 when he met them then, hey? Well, Joe Biden was out of office at that stage, so it would make no sense for them to be bribing him in 2017. But where does all this leave the potential Biden impeachment? Because this was their big piece of evidence. Sean Hannity ran this informer's claims in 85 segments on his show last year, including in 28 monologues. Now look, I sympathise with Sean John. I know exactly what it's like to have hours and hours of airtime to fill when you've got nothing but speculation. So could I suggest maybe old Eurovision songs? They're great! Yeah, my golden shoes. You're welcome, Sean. Woo! That's enough.
Election 2024. What's at stake?
On my watch, instead of Infrastructure Week, America's having infrastructure decade. Over $1.3 billion.
And that is it for another trip to Planet America. Join us for the Fireside Chat on ABC News this Friday for a preview of the upcoming primaries and more from Bill Browder on Navalny, Putin and Trump.
And do not forget, we're on iView and YouTube by 9 p.m. each Wednesday night, if the temporary later broadcast time's getting a little bit late for your taste. See you on Friday. And we're going to leave you now with a little bit more of the greatest song of all time. Woo!